Sometimes the hardest decisions in medicine have nothing to do with medicine. Sometimes they're about choosing between protocol and humanity, between safety and saving lives, between who deserves treatment and who doesn't. On March 15, 2020, I faced a choice that would define not just my career, but my understanding of what it means to be a healer in a broken world. My name is Dr. Thomas Miller, and this is the story of the night I treated a gang leader and his victim in the same room, and why it was the right thing to do. It was a Saturday night on Chicago's South Side, the kind of evening when violence feels inevitable. Our ER was already busy. 3 domestic disputes, 2 overdoses, and a stabbing from an argument over a parking space. Just another typical weekend in trauma medicine. Then the call came in. Multiple gunshot victims inbound, gang-related shooting, ETA 3 minutes. In 40 years of emergency medicine, I've learned that gang-related means more than just medical complexity. It means police escorts, heightened security, and the very real possibility that the violence isn't over when the ambulances arrive. How many? I asked Maria Santos, our head triage nurse. 2 confirmed, shooter and victim, both critical. I felt my stomach tighten. Treating the shooter and victim simultaneously is every ER doctor's nightmare. It means walking into a room where hatred is as present as the smell of blood, where saving one life might mean facing the rage of the other. The first ambulance arrived at 11:47 p.m. The victim, Carlos Mendoza, 17 years old, gunshot wound to the chest. Conscious but fading fast. The paramedics' report was grim. Bullet had nicked his lung. He was losing blood quickly. "Get him to Trauma 1, I ordered, already moving toward the ambulance bay. "Dr. Miller," Maria called out, "the second ambulance is here." The shooter, Antonio Tank Rodriguez, 24, known gang leader in the Diablos. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, another to the leg. He'd been shot during what police described as a retaliatory exchange, after he'd wounded Carlos. "Trauma 2?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the resident working that night. That's when I saw the problem. Trauma 2 was occupied by a heart attack patient we were prepping for transfer to the cardiac unit. Trauma 3 was down for cleaning after a particularly messy industrial accident. Our usual overflow areas were filled with the evening's earlier casualties. I had 1 trauma room available and 2 gunshot victims who represented opposite sides of a gang war that had been escalating for months. "Dr. Miller," Officer Janet Williams approached me, her voice tight with concern. "We need to talk about security protocols here. These 2, they can't be in the same room." I looked through the trauma bay windows. Carlos was barely conscious, his mother Maria having just arrived and now sobbing at his bedside. Tank was handcuffed to his gurney, surrounded by 3 officers, his eyes burning with the kind of rage that doesn't die just because you're bleeding. "Doctor," Officer Williams continued, "Tank Rodriguez isn't just any gang member. He's the one who shot that kid. If they're in the same room..." "I understand the security concerns," I said, "but I have 2 critical patients and 1 available trauma room. Can't one of them wait?" I looked at the monitors showing both patients' vital signs. Carlos's blood pressure was dropping despite our efforts to control the bleeding. Tank's abdominal wound showed signs of internal bleeding that could turn fatal within minutes. "No," I said. "They both need immediate surgery, and I need them both stable before I can move them to the OR." What happened next violated every security protocol, challenged every assumption about gang violence, and taught me something about human nature that 40 years of medicine hadn't prepared me for. I made the decision that would haunt administrators and amaze my colleagues. I put them in the same room. "Bring Tank to Trauma 1, I announced. "Dr. Miller, I strongly advise against this," Officer Williams protested. "Noted, but I have 2 people dying, and I'm not going to let protocol kill either of them." The tension in Trauma 1 was immediate and electric. Carlos's mother pressed herself against the far wall, fear replacing grief on her face. Tank, despite his injuries, tried to sit up when he saw Carlos, his handcuffs rattling against the gurney rails. "That little punk shot me," Tank growled, his voice thick with pain and anger. "You shot my boy first," Maria Mendoza screamed back, her anguish transforming into rage. "Security, I need everyone to step back," I called out, positioning myself between the 2 gurneys. "Sarah, start Tank on 2 large-bore IVs. I need a CBC, basic metabolic panel, and type and cross for 6 units. Dr. Miller, this is insane, Dr. Kim whispered. Probably, but insane is letting people die because we're afraid of conflict. As I worked on Carlos, stabilizing his chest tube and monitoring his breathing, I could feel Tank watching every move. Not with the cold calculation I expected from a gang leader, but with something else. Something that took me a moment to recognize. Concern. Is he gonna make it? Tank asked quietly. I looked up, surprised by the question. We're doing everything we can. He's just a kid, Tank said, and for a moment his voice lost its edge. A kid you shot, Carlos's mother spat. Lady, your kid shot me first. I was defending myself. Defending yourself? You're 24 years old. He's 17. I continued working, trying to block out the argument while monitoring both patients. But then Tank said something that stopped everyone in the room. I know he's 17, he's my little brother. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the monitors seemed to beat more quietly. What did you say? Maria Mendoza whispered. Carlos, he's my baby brother. Different fathers, same mother. She moved him out of the neighborhood when he was 12, tried to keep him away from this life. Tank's voice was barely audible now. I hadn't seen him in 2 years until tonight. I stopped what I was doing and looked at Tank directly. You're telling me you shot your own brother? I didn't know it was him. It was dark. He had a hood up. By the time I recognized him, Tank's voice broke. It was too late. The room shifted. Suddenly, this wasn't a story about gang violence. It was a story about family, about choices, about how poverty and circumstance can turn brothers into enemies. Carlos came looking for me tonight. Tank continued, his words coming out in painful gasps. Said he wanted to join the Diablos. Said he was tired of being poor, tired of watching our mother work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. I looked at Carlos, still unconscious but stable. And you told him no? Hell yes, I told him no. This life, it's poison. I've been trying to get out for 2 years, but once you're in, once you're marked, Tank gestured weakly at his various scars and tattoos. I told him to go home. He got angry, said I didn't get to make decisions for him anymore. He pulled a gun. So you shot him? Dr. Kim asked, her voice barely concealing her disgust. I shot over his head, warning shot, but his gun went off in the confusion, got me in the leg. Then his friends showed up, my crew showed up. Tank closed his eyes. Everything went to hell. In the crossfire, I caught one in the gut, and Carlos, I saw him go down and I knew I'd shot my little brother. Maria Mendoza was crying again, but now her tears seemed confused, torn between rage and heartbreak. Ma'am, Tank addressed her directly, I know you got every right to hate me, but I swear on our mother's grave, if I'd known it was Carlos, I would have let him shoot me first. That's when Carlos stirred. His eyes opened slowly, confusion giving way to recognition as he saw Tank in the bed next to him. Tony, he whispered, using what I assumed was Tank's real name. Yeah, little brother. I'm here. Am I dying? I moved to Carlos's side. No, you're going to be fine, but you need surgery to repair the damage to your lung. Is Tony okay? I looked at Tank, Antonio, who was watching his brother with an expression of pure anguish. He's going to need surgery too, I said. You both are. What happened next challenged every assumption I'd made about gang members, about violence, about the nature of evil. Carlos reached across the space between the gurneys, his hand extended toward his brother. Tank, despite his handcuffs, managed to reach back, and for a moment the 2 brothers held hands across the divide of their choices. I'm sorry, Tony, Carlos whispered. I'm sorry I put you in this position. No, baby brother. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this life. I'm sorry I became something that made you think this was your only option. The police officers in the room shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the narrative they were expecting. This wasn't the clear-cut case of criminal and victim they'd prepared for. Dr. Miller, Officer Williams approached me quietly. What are we supposed to do here? Legally, Tank still shot a minor, Carlos still shot at a rival gang member. But if they're family, that's not my department, I said, checking Tank's abdominal dressing. My job is to save lives. The rest is up to you and the lawyers. Both brothers needed emergency surgery. Carlos for his lung repair, Tank for his abdominal injuries. But here's where the story gets even more complicated. As we prepped them for the OR, Tank made a request that surprised everyone. "Doc, I want to make a deal." "This isn't the time for deals, Tony," I said. "No, hear me out. I've got information about the Diablos, about other gangs, about operations the police have been trying to bust for years. I'll tell them everything." "In exchange for what?" "Protection for Carlos, not just from prosecution, but from retaliation. When word gets out that he shot me, that he was trying to join a rival gang, he's going to be marked. Both sides will want him dead." I looked at Officer Williams, who was listening intently. "You'd flip on your own organization to protect him?" she asked. "It's not my organization anymore," Tank said. "It never was, really. I was just trying to survive, and I got trapped. But Carlos, and he's got a chance to have a real life. College, career, family. I won't let my mistakes take that away from him." The surgeries went smoothly. Carlos's lung was repaired without complications. Tank's abdominal surgery was more complex. We had to remove part of his small intestine and repair damage to his liver, but he pulled through. During their recovery, something remarkable happened. The story of the two brothers spread through the hospital, then through the neighborhood, then through the city. The gang war that had been escalating for months suddenly found itself with an unexpected ceasefire. It turns out that Carlos wasn't the only young person being recruited by rival gangs. Tank wasn't the only older brother trying to protect family members from the life he'd chosen. The shooting had become a symbol of something larger, the way poverty and desperation turned families against themselves. Tank kept his word. His testimony led to dozens of arrests and the disruption of 3 major drug operations. In exchange, Carlos was placed in witness protection and relocated to Minnesota, where he's now a sophomore studying engineering at the University of Minnesota. Tank served 18 months in minimum security prison for weapons charges. When he was released, he started working with a community organization that helps at-risk youth avoid gang recruitment. He speaks at schools, telling his story, warning kids about the choices that led him to shoot his own brother. The last time I saw Tank, Antonio, was 6 months ago. He came to the ER to donate blood during a particularly busy trauma weekend. "Dr. Miller," he said, "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For treating us both like human beings that night, for not choosing sides, for giving us both a chance to live." "That's my job, Antonio." "No, sir, that's who you are. Most doctors would have found a way to separate us, would have let protocol or fear make the decision. You chose to see us as people, not just gang members." I thought about that conversation for weeks afterward. The truth is, that night challenged everything I thought I knew about violence, about justice, about the nature of good and evil. Tank Rodriguez wasn't evil. He was trapped. Carlos Mendoza wasn't innocent. He was desperate. The gang war wasn't about territory or drugs. It was about survival in a system that had failed these young men long before they failed each other. By treating them in the same room, by forcing them to confront each other's humanity, something shifted, not just in their relationship, but in the entire dynamic of the conflict they represented. The Hippocratic Oath says, "First, do no harm." That night I learned that sometimes the greatest harm comes from treating people as categories instead of individuals. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do is to refuse to see enemies where family exists. Would I make the same decision again? Absolutely. Despite the security risks, despite the protocol violations, despite the administrative headaches that followed, putting those two brothers in the same room was the right choice. Because medicine isn't just about fixing bodies. Sometimes it's about healing relationships, bridging divides, and reminding people of their shared humanity. Carlos and Tank Rodriguez taught me that the most important medical intervention isn't always surgical. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let hatred and circumstance divide what love and blood should unite. Today, Carlos is studying to become an engineer. Tank is working to prevent other young people from making his mistakes. And a gang war that could have consumed dozens of young lives ended not with more violence, but with two brothers remembering that they loved each other more than they hated their circumstances. Sometimes the best medicine is just giving people a chance to remember who they really are.